Before we start, I like to say I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers on this channel, so please hit that subscribe button and like the video and help me get to the goal. Anyway, onto the video. Alright, hey guys, welcome to a brand new video. After the announcement of the Misfits Darren vs Luke Rockhold card, I felt like I needed to make this video. 5 years ago, it would have been unfathomable that Salt Papi would be fighting Tony Ferguson, and that Salt Papi would be the favorite in that fight. It sounds like a plotline off of Simpsons or Family Guy, but yet, here we are. Ferguson, Rockhold, and Till aren't the only ones who are doing this though. Over the last 8 years or so, there's been a trend with MMA fighters going into boxing. I feel like the entire trend started with Conor McGregor deciding to fight Floyd Mayweather in 2017. That's not to say there hadn't been MMA dudes going into boxing before that, but this is where I feel like the rest of them saw the payday that Conor got for the Floyd fight and thought they needed a piece of that. This sort of boxing perfectly coincided with the rise of influencer boxing, which, whether you like it or not, had sold the most pay-per-views in boxing in years up to that point. I feel like this is how some of these MMA fighters, especially the older ones, felt like they could get a payday without getting hurt too bad. But that's exactly where the problem starts. One of the biggest issues with MMA fighters going into boxing is the fact that a lot of them think that it's going to be easy because MMA is more complicated than boxing, and when they're fighting an influencer who isn't a real fighter, they should be able to take them out easily. Not only do the fighters have this thought process, but some of the fans do as well. Now, here's a problem with this. Boxing is a different sport than MMA and requires a different skill set. The misconception is that MMA striking equals boxing, which isn't true. The stances used for MMA are completely different to the stances used in boxing. This is because you're blocking more things in MMA. Boxing is all about head movement, the bob and weave, where MMA isn't as much. Yet, because MMA dudes had a little boxing training, they think they can beat pro boxers. This is how guys like Jake Paul trick audiences. The concept of influencer boxer is also something that MMA fighters use to claim that they can beat them. Here's the thing. Influencer boxing isn't a separate sport from boxing. A lot of these influencers have dedicated a big portion of their life to boxing. They pretty much are boxers now. They train like professionals and have head coaches who treat them like professional fighters. Yes, you're an influencer, but you decide you want to fight. Now we expect you in the gym, even if you don't have a fight. This is why I feel like every influencer nowadays has their boxing phase, where they fight 3 to 4 times in a year before they remember that they don't actually need to fight. That is to say, fighting an influencer boxer with more experience than you is more like fighting a low-level pro boxer than it is a stupid influencer boxer. MMA fighters often never succeed in boxing and often get really hurt. This is how Elle Brooke, the OnlyFans model and porn star, was able to knock down Paige Van Zandt, a professional MMA fighter who had some bare-knuckle fights in the past. To put this in perspective, I'm gonna list out a bunch of MMA fighters who boxed and the result of their fights. Conor McGregor, TKO loss to Floyd Mayweather. Ben Askren, TKO loss to Jake Paul. Tyron Woodley, KO loss to Jake Paul. Anderson Silva, knocked down by Jake Paul and defeat by UD. Nate Diaz, knocked down by Jake Paul and defeat by unanimous decision. Dylan Dennis, disqualification loss to Logan Paul, but it was really a majority decision and damn near KO. Paige Van Zandt, knocked down by Elle Brooke and draw. Francis Ngannou, knocked down by Joshua. Benson Henderson, unanimous decision loss to Idris Virgo. Alan Belcher, Chase Damore. I don't even need to keep going. But one of the other problems with this is that most of these fighters are almost every fighter I mentioned is old and completely out of their prime. Most of them ended their MMA career on a losing streak, and not just a losing streak, a bad losing streak where they got KO'd in a lot of their fights. Askren lost twice in a row before going into boxing. Woodley lost 4 times before going into boxing. Darren Till lost 3 times before going into boxing. Luke Rockhold lost 3 times in a row before going into boxing. Tony Ferguson lost 8 times in a row before going into boxing. Pettis lost twice in a row before going into boxing. Masvidal lost 4 times before going into boxing. Silva lost 3 times before going into boxing. Van Zandt lost 3 out of her 4 last MMA fights before going into boxing. Nate Diaz lost 3 out of his 5 last MMA fights before going into boxing, and Darren Stewart ended on a loss to Carlos Pereira. You know, you get the point. I think a lot of these guys have been fighting for so long that they don't know how to stop. So they try to remain active in some way and end up getting KO'd. This is what I think will inevitably happen to Tony Ferguson, by the way. None of these people are in their physical prime, but stay in denial that they can still fight. Because 1, that's how they make money, and 2, they would be lost without fighting. There have been a handful of MMA fighters who have succeeded in boxing, and they've done so by doing one thing: boxing other MMA fighters. When the skill set is matched, it equals to a more fair fight. Darren Till is a big example of this. He's headlined the last 2 Misfits events, where he fought Darren Stewart and Anthony Taylor, and he is about to fight Luke Rockhold. All these people are other MMA fighters. I mean, originally he was supposed to fight Tommy Fury. I don't know how that would have gone, but Chris Avila fought Anthony Pettis and Anthony Taylor and won. Benson Henderson fought Avila and won. Nate Diaz fought Masvidal in boxing and won. If retired MMA fighters are going to continue fighting, this is definitely the way they should do it. This way, the skill set is similar, and both opponents aren't going far out of the skill set. Other people who succeeded, to an extent, are people like Anthony Taylor. He's one of the few people who ended his MMA career on a winning record. He's lost to most pro boxers and other MMA fighters he's fought, but he's won against most influencers he's fought. Skill-wise, he's a perfect balance for what he is. He also fits right into the Misfit scene, as his personality and disruptiveness fits right into that space. Dylan Dennis should have succeeded, as his personality fits into that space as well, which is why he's doing MMA in Misfits now and not the UFC or Bellator. But obviously he's not the best boxer. In fact, he's a horrible boxer. But if Dylan Dennis was to keep fighting, this is definitely the way he should do it. He's too controversial for every other promotion. This is the way I personally think retired MMA fighters should move forward, instead of going to something like the GFL, because you know, it's more dangerous that way. Regardless of if your opponent is washed up, MMA is not good for your overall well-being. Neither is boxing, but boxing is a tad bit more safer for your overall well-being, rather than getting kicked in the face and taken down and choked out. Like, it's just a little bit better. This is definitely the way I think they should go, and I wish everyone the best in the next fights that they have. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, please do the thumbs up. I don't know how good these videos are gonna do. Let me know if you want me to do any sort type of video. I'm kind of just experimenting right now, and just to see kind of what gets some traction, what people like to like. I appreciate the feedback on the last Deji video, but yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Please do a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next video.